So I've read your story. It's an amazing story. You won the Nobel Prize back in 2011 in the chemistry category. I've tried to understand what it was about, like crystal structures in metal alloys, so I read. And I was lost there. But it was interesting in a Guardian report I read that was published a couple of years ago, and it said you faced immense struggle when you were developing your report, because a lot of people didn't believe you. And that's not the only struggle now. I think a lot of people in Ukraine, a lot of entrepreneurs and people who are involved in technology struggle because of the economy. So from your experience, what would you suggest to these entrepreneurs and people involved in technology to get through this boundary? Because often it's the money that stops them.
Oh, you mean in Ukraine?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I can talk about technological entrepreneurship, although I'm a scientist, because I have been teaching technological entrepreneurship in my institute, the Technion in Haifa, in Israel, for the last 30 years. 30 years ago, I started a class called Technological Entrepreneurship. Why did I start this class? Because when I was a student at the Technion, the spirit of the Technion told us in many ways, you'll be so good that when you graduate, everybody will want to hire you. And I said, this is wonderful, but what if I want to open my own technology business? Technion didn't teach that. 1986, I became a full professor, and then I said, now I can do what I want, and started this class. It's a large class, many hundreds of students each year. And over the last 30 years, I have about 10,000 graduates who are now engineers and scientists in Israel who took my class, and they have the chip of entrepreneurship embedded in their minds.
Yeah.
And over that period of time, Israel became a startup nation.
It is. I mean, it's a hub, isn't it?
Right. I have something to do with it, maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is about technological entrepreneurship. Now, what about Ukraine? Let's put it this way. The most important natural resource that you have in Ukraine is human ingenuity. If you invest in human ingenuity, if you invest in basic education to everybody, good basic education to everybody, that means getting the best to teach. That means raise salaries for teachers. That also means choose the best people to go to colleges for becoming teachers, teaching colleges. And I will recommend that in order to attract talented people to become teachers, pay them salary while they study.
This is a problem that there is in Ukraine, where the teachers are actually paid very low salaries for the work that they do. And also science is important because in school, often people would only start to learn science from maybe the teenage years, but actually I read another article where you suggested that children should start learning.
Absolutely. So teachers are the most important people in the country. A teacher work has a very great financial value. It's a wonderful investment. If a country invests in good teachers, the results will be excellent. Now, you have mentioned teaching science. I think that every country, and this is your future, you want more technological entrepreneurs. In order to have more, you need more engineers and scientists and biologists and computer experts and so on, because these are the people that open new startups. But young people, in many cases, don't want to become engineers and scientists and so on because it's difficult. How do you make science something that a young child will like? And this is how I started teaching science to kindergarten children.
So you have this innovation almost. How would you advise Ukrainian startups and Ukrainian entrepreneurs to take this innovation and move it to a marketable product? Because, for example, can you give an example in your work? For example, when you were doing your report for the Nobel Prize, how did that science transform into something that we use in the real life nowadays?
Okay, so you talk about application of quasi-periodic materials.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so yes, once you find a new class of materials, as I have, then people start to study their properties. And because there are hundreds of quasi-periodic materials, different compositions, people study hundreds of properties of different materials. Once you find something interesting, something unique, you look for an application. So there are applications for quasi-periodic materials that start at the end of the story. 3D printing, very useful in 3D printing. Catalysts in production of some chemicals. Low surface energy, meaning non-stick materials.
Like frying pans.
Frying pans, for instance,
Yeah.
right. You can make an omelette and it doesn't stick. And it's better than Teflon because Teflon is poisonous.
Yeah. So how did you do this? So you have these products, but who did you approach to actually turn this science into the marketable products? Because this is often I would imagine it's the dilemma that scientists face. They do this great research, but then you have to turn this somehow into money almost.
Okay, innovation and technological entrepreneurship do not necessarily be done by the same person. You have the innovator with innovations, and you have the entrepreneur that says, wow, this is great. I'm going to make a product out of it. This is a different person in many cases, most cases, in fact. So entrepreneurship, yeah. But how do you create a nation of entrepreneurs? We have made it in Israel. It's a miracle.
Well, if you go there to Israel, you can see it all around.
It's all, and everybody talks about it.
What about Ukraine in Israel? Like you said that you've taught hundreds of students over your time. Have you seen much innovation come from Ukraine in the Israeli market, or have you heard much?
I don't. There may be, but I don't know about it. I have not seen a lot of innovation coming from Ukraine, although there may be such innovation. Most of the innovation in Israel comes from Israel, by Israeli people.
And do you get much help from the Israeli state? And it will be the same in Ukraine, from the Ukrainian state, because I mean, for entrepreneurs, it's one thing to be an entrepreneur in selling vegetables, but if you're selling high-tech things, it's a completely different structure. So, what sort of specialities do you need to develop these sort of products? What would you recommend the Ukrainian government does to help develop these companies?
Okay, these are separate issues. Number one, a government role.
Yeah.
So government has many things that governments can do, but specifically to the point, in Israel, between 4 and 4.5% of the GDP is invested back into R&D, research and development.
Really? That's a
It's
lot.
a huge percentage, huge. It's number one in the world. Okay, so this helps. And there are ways to do it. Let me give you one example. We have a person who is called the chief scientist of one of the ministries. He has very large amount of money to invest in R&D. If you have a good idea, a young man like you comes with a good idea, you can apply for some funds from the chief scientist. If there's a committee that go through your idea. If they decide it's a good idea, then you will get the money. Now, in most cases, if you are successful and your company brings money, you have to pay back the investment. So they invested some money in you, maybe $500,000.
Yeah.
You pay back over the years from your sales. If you failed, it was a gift. Okay, you don't owe anything.
So it's business almost, isn't it? Yeah. And how do these Israeli companies compete on the foreign markets now? Because you have goods and educated people. You know, the human capital coming from India, from China. So for Ukraine, even how can Ukraine compete on the world stage with so many people, so many technology and innovation, that sort of thing?
Well, the fact is, in Israel we do compete on the world market by innovation.
So
We invent new things all the time, all the time, and it's perpetuum, like perpetuum mobile. It happens all the time. Let me give you an example. Some of these startups do exit. Okay. So in Israel, the money that flows in from exits is between $8 to $9 billion a year.
Wow.
It's think about the budget of your government. It's a big portion of the budget of the government, and it comes from exits. And it's, so you think the country is depleted? No. More ideas, more startups come, and so on and so forth. And another thing is the following. This may be a lesson to Ukraine. What does it mean, exit? It means that a person or a group of people sell their company. They end up with several $100 million in their pockets. What they do in Israel is they reinvest in new startup in the same field. So it's a wonderful investment. If a young company gets investment from these people, that person is called an angel, money from angels. Why is it good money? Number one, that person is interested in the success of the company. Not like a bank who doesn't care. Yeah. He is really interested. He's involved. He can bring in good advices. He can bring in networking. He has networking in the country and outside the country. He knows the markets, okay? He can pick up the phone and say, hey guys, I have a new company, a new product, I want you to look at it, all right? And so on. So angels is wonderful. So it's a perpetuum process. Startup, successful, grows, in many cases exit, reinvest, not in one startup, but in many startups now.
Yeah, and people get inspired. If they're successful in one startup, then they will do another. And actually, I have a few Ukrainian friends who have now gone to America and Canada, and they're trying to take their startups there. So it would work in the same way, I would guess. Yeah. And Mr. Shechtman, one last question for you. You won your Nobel Prize back in 2011. Obviously, I'm not quite as intelligent as you are, but what's your secret to winning the Nobel Prize?
Well, this goes back to education. And my message to young students who want to become scientists is the following. I tell them the following. You have to have two features in order to succeed as a scientist. Number one, you have to have broad knowledge. You have to know biology and physics and chemistry. You have to know something about computers. You have to know the language of mathematics. Broad knowledge. But above all, you have to become an expert in something that you like. One peak of expertise. Choose something that you like, but become number one in that. Become an expert, okay? Indulge in becoming an expert in something that you like. And I promise you, I say, if you have broad knowledge in science and one peak of expertise, I promise you will have a wonderful career in science.